I was yanked out of sleep by the kind of pounding that makes your heart kick into survival mode. 3 violent slams shook my front door hard enough to rattle the frame, followed by a woman's voice slicing through the early morning air. "Open the door right now. This is an immediate inspection." I wasn't even fully awake, but the tone, sharp, commanding, almost militaristic, sent a shot of adrenaline through my chest. For a second, I thought something terrible had happened in the neighborhood. No one yells like that unless there's an emergency, or they believe they own you. I stumbled out of bed, still half blind, fumbling through the cold hallway. When I swung the door open, dawn light spilled across my porch, and standing there was a woman with a clipboard held like a weapon. She was tall, rigid, her jaw clenched so tight I could hear her teeth grind. Frosty air curled around her breath as she snapped, "You were given notice about your overdue compliance review. Step aside, now." For a moment, I just stared at her, trying to make sense of anything she was saying. My voice cracked as I muttered, Who are you?" She looked offended that I didn't already know. "Janice Crowley, HOA president. You're in violation of multiple maintenance codes, and I'm here to document them." She thrust a stack of papers toward my chest, practically hitting me with them. Her eyes didn't blink. They scanned me the way a drill sergeant might size up a disobedient recruit, but nothing she said made sense. My neighborhood didn't even have an HOA. I'd lived here for 6 years, mowed my lawn, paid my taxes, waved to neighbors, replaced the old fence twice. Never once had anyone mentioned a homeowners association, let alone one aggressive enough to treat a resident like a criminal at sunrise. I took a step back, gripping the doorknob like I needed something to anchor me. "There's no HOA here," I said. "Not in this subdivision." Her expression twisted into something between disbelief and disgust. "You think you can ignore the rules just because you feel like it?" she hissed. "That's not how this works." Her breath hit my face, sharp, acidic, and cold, as she leaned forward. I looked down at the documents she shoved at me. They weren't official. The logo was pixelated, the language vague, and half the lines weren't even filled in. My confusion shifted into irritation. "If you're claiming you're the HOA president," I said slowly, "then show me your registration, county approval, legal documentation. Something." She snapped upright like I'd struck her. "We don't owe you anything," she snapped back. "You owe us, and you're already late." Even in the quiet chill of the morning, I could feel the tension coil like a wire ready to snap. I wasn't trying to fight. I wasn't trying to argue. I simply wanted to understand who this woman was and why she was screaming on my porch. But Janice reacted as if I had challenged her authority in front of a crowd. She stepped off my porch, pointed a finger in my face, and hissed, "You've been warned. Refuse to cooperate and enforcement action will follow." Then, louder, so loud it echoed down the street, she barked, "Either cooperate or face consequences by tomorrow." I closed the door slowly, my pulse thundering. I didn't know it yet, but this was only the beginning. Tomorrow's consequences were going to be far worse than anything I imagined. The next morning, I drove to the county recorder's office with barely any sleep, still hearing Janice's voice echoing in my head. I needed answers, real ones, not whatever scripted garbage she had barked at me. The moment I stepped inside, the quiet hum of old ceiling fans mixed with the sharp buzz of flickering fluorescent lights. The whole place smelled like aging paper, ink, and dust, the kind of scent that clings to buildings where truths get buried for decades. I walked up to the counter and explained why I was there, handing over the shaky packet of papers Janice had shoved at me. Clerk Alan Fenwick, a middle-aged man with thinning hair and glasses that slid down his nose every few seconds, took the documents with a patient sort of curiosity. He didn't say much at first, just flipped pages, frowning deeper with each turn. The room was so quiet I could hear the old wood clock ticking behind him. Then suddenly he closed the folder with a sharp, echoing slap. He looked up at me with an expression I will never forget and said, "Whoever that woman is, she's lying." For a moment I didn't breathe. What do you mean lying? About what? Alan slid the papers back toward me and adjusted his glasses. There is no HOA registered for your subdivision. There never has been. He tapped the papers Janice gave me. These aren't official documents. No seal, no filing number, no county record, nothing. This isn't even formatted correctly for an HOA charter. His words settled in my stomach like ice. I had expected something strange, maybe an error or a misunderstanding, but not a complete fabrication. Not a lie delivered with that much aggression and confidence. So she just made this up? I asked. Alan hesitated, then leaned in a little, lowering his voice. You're not the first homeowner to come in asking about mysterious HOA notices. There were 2 other complaints in the last few weeks. Different neighborhoods. Same pattern. His voice dropped further. Fake violations, fake dues, fake officers, all demanding immediate payment. A cold shiver crawled up my spine. The anger I felt standing on my porch yesterday slowly transformed into something heavier. Fear. Janice wasn't just overstepping. She wasn't just being controlling or overdramatic. She was running something organized, something practiced, something dangerous. And if she had the nerve to show up screaming at dawn, what else was she capable of? I thanked Alan and left the office. But the walk through the hallway felt longer than before. Every buzzing light, every dusty bookcase, every echoing footstep reminded me I was stepping deeper into something I didn't understand. I drove home with my thoughts racing faster than the road beneath me. But nothing prepared me for what I saw as I pulled into my driveway. A bright red notice was taped squarely to my front door. Not white like the last one. Red. Bold letters across the top read, "Final warning." The paper whipped lightly in the breeze as if mocking the anxiety pounding in my chest. I climbed out of the truck, feeling the weight of dread settle over me again. The notice was short, typed in a tone meant to intimidate. You have failed to comply. Forced compliance will begin without further notice. I stood frozen on my doorstep, fingers trembling around the edge of the paper. Forced compliance? What did that even mean? Whatever it was, I was about to find out. And it wasn't going to be pretty. I had barely processed the red notice on my door when the next punch of chaos arrived. Loud, sudden, and drilling straight through the quiet morning. I heard Janice's voice before I even stepped outside. It was sharp, commanding, and echoing across the street like a drill sergeant barking at raw recruits. Measure his yard. Film everything. I want every violation documented. Her voice cracked through the neighborhood, jolting me into motion. When I stepped onto my porch, the scene unfolding in my driveway didn't look like anything a homeowner should ever see. Janice wasn't alone this time. She had brought 2 men, Rick and Tommy, both wearing matching dark jackets, clipboards in hand, pacing like they were conducting a tactical sweep. Tommy carried a tape measure he kept snapping open and slamming shut. Rick had a small camera and was circling my property with exaggerated, aggressive steps, filming every inch of my siding, windows, gutters, everything. They weren't behaving like neighbors. They weren't behaving like any legitimate HOA I'd ever heard of. They were acting like an untrained private enforcement squad. And Janice? She stood dead center in my driveway, issuing commands like she owned the entire block. Her eyes landed on me with pure irritation. You were supposed to comply, she snapped. Instead, you chose defiance. So now we do this the hard way. I forced myself to stay calm, though anger clawed at my chest. Without saying a word, I pulled out my phone and began recording every move they made. As I did, a bitter satisfaction flickered inside me. If they wanted to document me, I'd document them right back. And in my state, one-party consent laws allowed recordings as long as one person, me, knew it was happening. They didn't need to know. They just needed to keep talking. Janice noticed the phone and rolled her eyes like I was inconveniencing her. Record all you want, she said, waving dismissively. It won't change the outcome. Then she snapped her fingers at Rick. Make sure you get the fence line. His setback dimensions are definitely out of compliance. Rick jogged to the fence while muttering fake codes under his breath. Codes that didn't belong to any legitimate regulation I'd ever heard of. His camera zoomed in on the wood posts like he was gathering evidence for a federal trial. Meanwhile, neighbors began peeking from their windows and partially open doors. I saw blinds shift, curtains twitch, silhouettes hovering just out of sight. People were scared to step outside, and I couldn't blame them. The entire scene looked like something out of a bad reenactment. 3 aggressive strangers trying to dominate a quiet residential street. The embarrassment of being targeted in front of everyone twisted in my gut, but the fear underneath it was worse. If they were bold enough to pull this stunt in daylight, what would they do next? Janice walked closer, heels clicking sharply on the pavement. "You're ignoring official notices," she said, voice dripping with authority she didn't possess. "You're resisting compliance. If you continue like this, we'll escalate this to law enforcement." Those words hit harder than she probably intended. Fake HOA or not, real or not, the threat sounded real. And after finding that red notice, I no longer believed Janice was playing some petty neighborhood power game. This was planned, organized, practiced. I lowered my phone but kept recording. "Show me your registration," I said quietly. "Just show proof this HOA exists." Janice's lips curled into a cold, victorious smile, like she had been waiting for me to say that. She leaned in and whispered sharply, "Next visit won't be this friendly." And then she turned her back and walked away, leaving that threat hanging in the air like a storm cloud ready to burst. The pounding on my door came fast, hard, so violent that the wood groaned under the impact. Before I could even process what was happening, 2 deep voices roared in unison. "Police! Open up!" The words slammed through my walls like a battering ram. My heart lurched into my throat. For a split second, I froze, staring at the door as another round of fists hammered against it. It didn't feel like a knock. It felt like an invasion. I forced myself forward, pulse racing. I hadn't broken any laws. I hadn't even gotten a speeding ticket in years. Why would the police be at my house? But the shouting continued, louder, angrier, and something about the tone didn't sound right. There was no professionalism, no procedure, no control, just force. I opened the door cautiously, and the sight waiting on the other side stopped me cold. 2 men stood on my porch wearing mismatched tactical gear. Their vests looked cheaply made, their patches crooked, and their badges looked like something you'd order online and hope no one inspected too closely. Under the weak morning light, the edges glinted with a shine that felt wrong, too light, too plastic. The taller one stepped forward, boots thudding heavily against the wooden boards. "We're community enforcement officers," he announced, puffing up his chest as if waiting for applause. "You refused compliance with your HOA. We're here to conduct an inspection." Community enforcement officers? That wasn't a real title. Not here. Not anywhere I knew of. My stomach tightened as I scanned their equipment. Earpieces with no visible radios, tactical gloves that didn't fit properly, and what sounded like radio static crackling from a cheap device clipped to the shorter man's vest. Not police radios. This was something else. Something off. My voice came out steadier than I expected. "If you're with the HOA or with law enforcement, show me the registration paperwork. Show me the legal authority you're operating under." The taller man didn't blink. He didn't reach for a badge. He didn't touch a document. He simply rolled his shoulders back and said, "That's not your concern. What you need to worry about is the list of violations you've racked up." The shorter one raised a tablet and started tapping aggressively, muttering fake codes under his breath. Exterior non-compliance. Property boundary breach. Structural deviation. His voice sounded rehearsed, like he memorized phrases without understanding them. Every instinct in me screamed they weren't real. Real officers don't threaten homeowners without explanation. Real officers don't wear gear that looks like it was pieced together from a surplus discount bin. And real officers don't shove their way into private property without introducing themselves properly. But fake or not, these men were standing on my porch, blocking my exit, staring at me with the kind of intensity that only comes from people who think they hold power. The tall one leaned closer, his breath hot against my face. "You refused the warnings," he said. "So now we're escalating the matter. You're facing fines, mandatory inspections, and if you keep pushing back, things are going to get very inconvenient for you." A flicker of fear tightened my chest. I wasn't dealing with an annoying neighbor anymore. This was something organized, Janice's next phase. She had sent these men to intimidate me into submission. Their fake badges, their pseudo-police jackets, their aggressive stance. All of it was meant to break me down. I swallowed hard, forcing myself not to step back. "Show me the HOA registration," I repeated, "or you leave." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then the taller man leaned in so close I could see the uneven plastic molding on his badge. He whispered, low and threatening, "Comply, or pay." His words dug beneath my skin like a blade. And the worst part? I had no idea how far they were willing to go. The next confrontation didn't start with me. It started with a voice I didn't expect. Sharp, furious, and coming from across the street. "You're not intimidating him," Sarah Whitmore shouted, her door slamming open so hard it bounced against the stop. Her voice tore through the tension like a blade. Janice, who was marching across my driveway with that same smug authority she always carried, froze mid-stride and whipped her head towards Sarah. Sarah was usually quiet, the kind of neighbor who waved politely while gardening and kept to herself. But that morning, she marched straight into the chaos with fire in her eyes. "There is no HOA here," she said, pointing at Janice and the two fake cops who had taken up positions near my yard. "Stop lying to people. Stop harassing us." Janice tried to regain control, lifting her chin. "Ma'am, this is official HOA business." Sarah cut her off. "Official? You're a fraud. And if you step on my property again, I'll call the real police." The fake cops shifted uneasily, but Janice didn't flinch. Instead, she forced a cold smile and replied, "You really shouldn't interfere. This doesn't concern you." But the way she said it, tight, venomous, made it clear Sarah was now on her list. I stepped closer to Sarah, grateful but nervous. The last thing I wanted was for anyone else to get dragged into this. But Janice's eyes burned with fury, and I knew she wasn't done. That night proved it. Around 1 a.m., harsh white beams of light blasted through my bedroom curtains. I jolted upright, heart pounding. A second later, I realized the beams weren't mine. They were coming from across the street. I rushed to the window and saw them. The same fake cops, walking slowly with high-powered flashlights, sweeping the lights across Sarah's windows, then across mine, then back again. Their shadows moved like predators searching for prey. One of them laughed quietly, a low muffled sound that made my skin crawl. They weren't here to inspect. They were here to intimidate. The light stayed for nearly 8 minutes. 8 long, tense minutes of beams cutting through glass, tracing the outlines of our rooms, our lives, like they were studying targets. By morning, half the neighborhood was talking. People whispered in driveways, watched the street from behind curtains, double-checked their locks. Community fear spread like a cold fog. Everyone felt it, the sense that something terrible was creeping through our quiet block. I spent the day documenting everything. Photos of the tire marks where the fake cops parked, videos of the flashlight sweeping my siding, audio recordings of Janice shouting orders. My phone was filling up with evidence because deep down, I knew someone would need to see this, someone who could actually help. Then Sarah called out to me from her porch with a trembling voice. She held up a bright yellow paper taped to her mailbox. "They put this on my property," she said. I crossed the street and felt my stomach drop. It said, "Property seizure notice." No signature, no legal stamp, no agency listed, just a threat printed in bold letters. Sarah's hands shook as she asked, "Mark, what is happening?" I didn't have an answer, but I felt something shift inside me, a sense of responsibility I couldn't ignore anymore. It wasn't just about me. These people were targeting the whole community, and if no one fought back, they'd keep going. That evening, after checking on Sarah again, I walked to my truck to clear out the remaining evidence files. That's when I saw it. A letter under my wiper, bold red text bleeding across the envelope. Final demand, before action. And suddenly, everything felt much more dangerous. The envelope felt heavier than paper had any right to feel. The moment I tore it open, a thick sheet unfolded, and the first line punched me right in the chest. Large, bold, capital letters screamed across the top. Pay your dues or lose your property. It wasn't subtle. It wasn't professional. It was aggressive, threatening, and designed to scare me into submission. Below the headline, the letter claimed, without hesitation, that I owed $800 in overdue HOA dues, plus accruing penalties. It ended with a final sentence meant to send a chill down any homeowner's spine. Failure to pay will result in immediate enforcement and possible forfeiture of property rights. I read it twice, then a third time, hoping some part would magically make sense. None of it did. My property rights? Forfeiture? From a fake HOA that didn't even exist in county records? They weren't just improvising anymore. They were escalating. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table with a pen, a notepad, and a printed form from the state website. If they wanted to pretend this was official business, then I would respond with something real. I drafted a certified demand letter requiring formal proof of HOA registration, legal authority, charter records, and governing documents. No proof, no compliance. It was clean, concise, and legally sound. More importantly, it created a paper trail, something my lawyer friend once told me was crucial when dealing with fraudulent or threatening entities. I mailed it the next morning, watching the postal clerk stamp it with a firm thunk that felt like the first real step in fighting back. But Janice didn't appreciate being challenged. Later that afternoon, as I pulled into the neighborhood, I saw her standing dead center in the middle of the street, arms crossed, feet planted wide, fury radiating from her like heat. The moment she spotted me, she started screaming. Not talking. Screaming. You think you can threaten me with legal nonsense? You think paperwork will save you? Her voice bounced off every house on the block. Curtains shifted. Doors cracked open. People were watching. I stepped out of the truck slowly, not wanting to add fuel to her fire. I just asked for registration, I said. If your HOA is legitimate, you should have nothing to hide. That set her off even more. She stormed toward me like she was ready to shove me aside. Before she could get close, an SUV screeched around the corner and came to a hard stop, blocking the road between us. Rick and Tommy jumped out, both staring with the same forced authority they'd used during the harassment incidents. Tommy crossed his arms, blocking my path deliberately. You're causing problems, he said. Big problems. I didn't engage. Instead, I walked around them, went inside, and locked the door. That night, shaken but determined, I called an attorney, Brandon Keller, a local lawyer known for dealing with property disputes. I explained everything: the fake HOA, the fake cops, the threats, the letters. Brandon was silent for a long moment, then said, "Start saving every document, every recording, every notice. Demand letters build strong legal trails, and you're going to need one." For the first time, I felt a flicker of hope. Someone believed me. Someone understood this was more than neighborhood drama. Hours later, well past midnight, I heard footsteps on my porch. Slow, deliberate, then a soft thud against my door. When I opened it, a new envelope lay at my feet. This one looked like a court summons, but the seal was fake, and the threat inside was worse. It started with a whisper, low, rushed, and right outside my window. "He's outside. Move now." The urgency in the voice sliced through the quiet night like a blade. My eyes snapped open, and for a moment I lay frozen, unsure if I'd imagined it. But then came the crunch of gravel beneath boots and the unmistakable sweep of flashlight beams slicing across my bedroom wall. They weren't just outside. They were close. Too close. I slipped out of bed, keeping low, every muscle tight. When I peeked through the blinds, adrenaline surged through me in a single electric burst. Two men in those same fake tactical vests were walking slowly through my yard, scanning every corner as if searching for contraband. Their flashlights cut through the darkness with long white streaks that landed on my fence, my shed, my windows, every private inch of my life. One of them rattled my gate, hard. The old metal hinges squealed under the pressure. "Check this side," he muttered. "If it's unlocked, we go in." The other man stepped closer, testing the latch again. My heart slammed against my ribs. This wasn't a daytime bluff or driveway theatrics. This was trespassing, deliberate, coordinated, and happening under the cover of night. And it wasn't fear that pushed me out of my room. It was anger, the kind that builds and builds until there's nowhere for it to go except forward. I grabbed my phone, hit record, and stepped out onto the porch. "Hey!" My voice echoed across the yard, stronger than I felt. "Get away from my property!" Both men spun around, flashlight beams blinding me for a second. When the light shifted, I saw the familiar cheap badges clipped to their vests. One badge hung crooked, barely attached. The taller fake cop stepped toward me, trying to regain whatever authority he thought he had. "You've ignored mandatory inspection notices," he said, chest heaving with adrenaline. "We're here to complete the process." "Mandatory inspection?" I shot back. At 1 a.m, with no documentation, with no legal authority? I angled my phone so the camera caught their faces clearly. "Say it again for the recording." His jaw tightened. "Put the phone down." "No," I said. "You're trespassing." The night air felt thick, heavy with tension. The crunching gravel under their boots sounded louder than it should have. The beams from their flashlights jittered with agitation, bouncing off fence posts and windows as their confidence slipped. From the corner of my eye, I noticed window shades shifting along the street. Neighbors watching again, too afraid to come out, too nervous to look away. The shorter man gestured toward me with the flashlight like it was a weapon. "This is your last warning. If you refuse inspection, enforcement will escalate." I took a step back toward the doorway, keeping my camera trained on them. "If either of you steps inside my gate again, you'll be explaining yourselves to real officers." For a second, everything froze. The lights, the shadows, their breathing, mine. And then something changed. A faint glow flickered at the far end of the street. Then another. Red. And blue. At first, I thought my fear was twisting the colors. But the glow grew brighter, sharper, washing over the pavement in slow, pulsing waves. One of the fake cops turned his head. "Someone called them," he muttered. The other stiffened. "We need to go." But it was too late. The unmistakable pattern of emergency lights filled the street, moving closer with every passing second. "Stay where you are," the voice boomed down the street, strong and unmistakably authoritative. Deputy Morales stepped out of the sheriff's cruiser with his hand hovering near his holster, flashlight sweeping the darkness. The fake cops froze for half a second, but only half. The taller one spun, muttering, "Go, go, go," before they bolted into the shadows between two houses. Morales shouted after them, but they disappeared into the night like they'd rehearsed the escape 100 times. I stood on my porch, breathing hard, still filming. Morales approached, scanning me first, then the yard. "You the homeowner who called?" he asked. His tone wasn't rude, just focused, alert. "I didn't even get the chance," I said. "They were already here when I woke up." He frowned, shining his light on the gate where they'd tried to enter. The metal latch was bent from their attempts. "Tell me exactly what happened." I explained everything. How they'd whispered outside my window, rattled the gate, shined their lights everywhere. Morales listened intently, nodding slowly, jaw tightening in a way that made it clear this wasn't the first time he'd heard a story like this. When I handed him my phone, he took it carefully, holding it under his light. As he played back the footage, his expression changed. Concern tightened into something sharper. Recognition. "These badges are fake," he muttered. "Very fake. And those vests?" I've seen versions like that before, usually from online tactical shops. I watched him study the video, frame by frame. When the fake cop had stepped close to whisper, "Comply or pay," Morales replayed that part 3 times. "They're not amateurs," he said. "They're organized and bold." He lowered the phone. "Impersonating law enforcement is a felony in this state. What you dealt with tonight wasn't a prank." Before he could say more, a loud voice erupted from down the street, sharp, shrill, and instantly recognizable. Janice. She came storming toward us, still wearing that ridiculous clipboard tucked under her arm like it was a badge of power. "This is neighborhood business," she shouted. "You have no jurisdiction here." Morales turned to her slowly. "Ma'am, impersonating officers and trespassing at 1 in the morning is not neighborhood business." Janice's eyes flashed with something unhinged. "You don't understand," she screamed. "He's the problem. He's the one refusing to cooperate. He's breaking community code. He's endangering the uniformed staff who are trying to enforce compliance." Uniformed staff. I almost laughed, but the tension was too thick. Morales squared his shoulders. "There is no registered HOA here. I checked last month for another complaint. So tell me, ma'am, exactly who are these officers working for?" For the first time since this entire nightmare began, Janice didn't have an immediate answer. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. No explanation came out. She finally hissed, "This isn't over," then stormed away, muttering something about higher authority under her breath. When she disappeared into the darkness, Morales exhaled slowly and handed my phone back. "You're not imagining things," he said. "This group is operating like a structured team. They're not just harassing you. They're running a coordinated scam." My stomach sank. It wasn't paranoia. It wasn't neighborhood conflict. It was something deeper. He took a step back toward his cruiser, then paused. "Listen," he said quietly. "You need to come to the station tomorrow. There's something big I need to show you." His words hit harder than the knock that started all of this. Something big? Bigger than fake cops? Bigger than Janice? For the first time, I realized the nightmare was far from over. The next morning, the sheriff's station felt colder than I remembered. Maybe it was the nerves. Maybe it was the fluorescent lights humming overhead. Or maybe it was the sense that I was finally about to learn just how deep this insanity went. Deputy Morales led me down a long hallway toward a small conference room. The moment I stepped inside, a man in a brown investigator's coat slammed a thick binder onto the metal table. The sound cracked through the room like a gunshot. He looked at me with a grim expression. "Sit down," he said. "You need to see this." He opened the binder, and I swear my breath stalled. Page after page of mugshots stared back at me. Different faces, different counties, same pattern. And next to each mugshot were photos of forged HOA notices, fake citations, counterfeit badges, and fabricated compliance warnings that looked eerily similar to the ones Janice had plastered across my door. "This," the investigator said, tapping the binder with 2 firm fingers, "is not a neighborhood dispute. This is a multi-county operation." My mouth went dry. "Multi-county? You mean they've done this before?" He nodded. "Janice Crowley and her group have been moving from one rural and suburban area to another. They set up a fake HOA, pick targets, usually homeowners who keep to themselves, and start issuing bogus violations. Intimidation, threats, forced inspections. It always escalates." He flipped through the binder, showing me evidence. Photos of fake identification cards, forged legal letters, counterfeit county seals. One page showed a collection of badges identical to the flimsy ones I'd seen hanging from those fake cops' vests. Another displayed HOA forms with obvious spelling errors and mismatched fonts. "They tailor the documents to whatever county they're in," the investigator continued, "but nothing they issue is legally binding. None of it is registered. These people are criminals, not administrators." It felt like my world tilted slightly. I had suspected something serious, but not this. Not an organized ring of fraudsters terrorizing homeowners across the state. I thought back to Janice's screaming, the phony cops pounding on my door, the midnight trespassing, the lights sweeping through my yard and Sarah's. At the time, it all felt chaotic and unplanned. Now I realized it was anything but. The sheriff entered the room and placed another file on the table. "Here's what you need to understand," he said. "To form a legal HOA, there must be recorded covenants, bylaws, and governing documents filed with the county. All homeowners must be notified. Everything must be public record. That woman didn't file anything. She's using the concept of an HOA because people fear authority." I felt my stomach sink. "So she picked my neighborhood because we're quiet. And because you pushed back," he said. "You became her focus." Morales pulled up a chair beside me. "The prosecutor wants to shut this group down for good. To do that, we need her caught on record. Again. This time with real officers positioned close enough to move in." A chill ran through me. "You want me to bait her?" "We want you to help us end this," Morales corrected. "You already have what they want. Your refusal. That's enough to draw her out." I leaned back, trying to steady my breathing. The emotional weight finally hit me. Not fear, but the realization that if I hadn't stood up when I did, I might have lost my home. Or worse. The investigator closed the binder slowly. "She'll come for you again," he said. "Be ready." The room went silent, and for the first time, I understood that the nightmare was far from finished. I never imagined I'd be standing in my own living room rehearsing lines with a sheriff's deputy, but that morning felt like entering a different world, a dangerous one I'd been dragged into and now had to help end. The officers had already begun setting up the sting. Unmarked vehicles were parked casually around the neighborhood. 2 plainclothes deputies pretended to jog past my house. Another disguised himself as a cable technician across the street, holding a drill that wasn't plugged into anything. They were everywhere, hidden in plain sight, waiting. Inside my house, Morales handed me a tiny recording device. "Just stick to the plan," he said. "Act like you're ready to settle. Tell her you have the cash. Keep her talking long enough for us to move in." He paused. "She'll come in aggressive. That's what she does. Don't rise to it." My palms were sweating. "And the fake cops she brings? We'll handle them," he said. "Just keep your phone visible enough for her to notice. She'll want to control the situation. That's when she'll slip." I nodded, though my heartbeat felt like it was trying to punch a hole through my chest. By noon, everything was in place. Morales and the undercover team took their positions, leaving me alone on the porch. The air felt too still, too quiet, heavy with the weight of something about to break. I held the envelope of fake cash, blank paper folded neatly, inside my jacket. Then I heard the sound I'd come to despise. Janice's voice echoing down the street. "Take the money out now!" She marched toward me like a storm, fury twisting her features. Behind her, Rick and Tommy emerged from their SUV, wearing the same mismatched tactical gear, badges dangling loosely on their vests. They spread out like they were forming a perimeter, scanning the area with exaggerated authority. I pretended not to notice the undercover officers watching from every angle. Janice stomped into my driveway, breath sharp, face flushed. "You finally came to your senses," she snapped. "Where is it? Let me see the payment." I held up the envelope slightly. "I'm ready to settle. We can end this today." She snatched the envelope from my hand so aggressively it crumpled. Her fingers dug into the paper as she tore it open. When she saw blank sheets instead of cash, her face twisted into something feral. "What is this?" she demanded. "Are you playing games with me?" "You said to bring the money," I replied calmly. "I wanted proof you were legitimate before handing anything over." Rick stepped forward, jabbing a finger at my chest. "You think we're joking? You think this is a negotiation?" His voice trembled, not with fear, but with anger that felt unstable. Tommy circled behind me, blocking my retreat. His boots crunched through the gravel in slow, rhythmic steps. I could feel adrenaline press against my ribs, tightening everything inside me. Janice's voice rose higher, cracking. "You don't get to question us. You owe dues. You owe penalties. You owe compliance." She waved the envelope in the air like a weapon. If you don't pay today, we take action. Her ranting grew louder, less coherent, spiking with rage she could no longer hide. It was exactly what Morales predicted. She was unraveling. Hidden cameras captured everything. But she didn't know it. Rick suddenly stepped closer, face inches from mine. His hand drifted toward his waistband, slow but deliberate. My breath hitched. Undercover officers tensed from their hidden posts. Gravel shifted, air thickened. I knew that movement. Everyone knew that movement. And he wasn't reaching for a wallet. He was reaching for something else. Get your hands up! The command ripped through the air before Rick's fingers even brushed his waistband. Suddenly, the quiet street erupted. Officers surged from every direction, behind hedges, from parked cars, from the house across the street, moving fast, coordinated, and unmistakably real. The crackle of radios, pounding footsteps, and shouts collided into a storm of authority that swallowed Janice and her crew in seconds. Rick froze, eyes wide, hands shooting upward as deputies closed in on him. Tommy spun around, startled, only to find 3 officers already on him. "Don't move," one shouted, tackling him into the grass before he could attempt anything stupid. Gravel sprayed as another officer slid in beside Rick, pinning him against the hood of the SUV. Janice stood in the middle of the driveway, stunned into silence for 3 long seconds. Then the screaming began. "This is unlawful! You can't do this!" she shrieked as an officer grabbed her wrist to cuff her. "I am a sovereign homeowner authority. You have no right. None of you have the right." Her voice cracked with hysteria as she kicked at the deputies restraining her. "He's the one breaking the codes. I'm the president. I'm the president. This is my jurisdiction." The officers didn't react to her theatrics. They'd heard ranting before, but to me hearing her scream that nonsense out loud after weeks of calculated intimidation was surreal. The carefully crafted persona she had forced on the neighborhood was crumbling in real time. All that fake power, fake authority, fake structure, it evaporated the moment real law enforcement stepped in. Morales moved in quickly and pulled something from Rick's waistband. He held it up to the air so everyone could see. A stun baton. Not a gun, not a taser, just another tool of intimidation. But in the wrong hands, even that could be dangerous. Morales tucked it into an evidence bag and looked at me. "This is exactly what we needed," he said quietly. "They're finished." As the fake cops were cuffed and loaded into separate patrol cars, Janice continued her tirade from the back seat of another cruiser. Her voice was muffled by the closed window, but every now and then I could catch fragments. Illegal seizure, homeowner sovereignty, full authority. Nonsense phrases that sounded even more unhinged now that she was behind glass. When everything finally settled, Morales walked over. "We got them on impersonation of law enforcement, extortion, harassment, trespassing, attempted fraud, and a half-dozen other charges. The prosecutor's going to have a field day with this." I nodded but didn't speak. Relief washed over me, heavy, overwhelming, and strangely hollow. I had imagined this moment so many times. The arrests, the shouting, the collapse of their fake empire. But standing there watching the last patrol car pull away, I didn't feel victorious. I felt drained, exhausted, like the adrenaline that kept me going for days had finally burned out. The prosecutor arrived shortly after, a tall woman with a calm voice but sharp eyes. "You did the right thing coming forward," she said. "This group has been hurting people for years. With your recordings and the sting footage, we can make this stick." She paused, studying my face. "One more question, Mark. Do you want to pursue civil damages?" Civil damages. Money for the stress, the fear, the late-night trespassing, the threats, all of it. I wasn't sure yet. I just needed to breathe. But before I could give her an answer, my phone buzzed. A new message. No sender ID. I opened it, expecting spam. Instead, I froze. "We are aware of what happened. The real counsel is watching." My stomach dropped. The real counsel? What did that even mean? And suddenly I realized the nightmare might not be over. I thought the chaos would end after the arrests. I thought the nights would quiet, the fear would fade, and life would finally return to the simple routine I'd always taken for granted. But the first sign that things weren't as settled as they seemed came 3 days later, when I walked out to my mailbox expecting nothing more than bills and junk flyers. Instead, I found a single envelope. No stamp, no return address, just my name written in shaky handwriting. When I tore it open, the note inside stopped my heartbeat for a full second. Stay silent. 2 words. Handwritten, underlined twice. The kind of warning that carries a weight your body recognizes before your mind does. But unlike Janice's threats, loud, dramatic, unhinged, this one was quiet, purposeful, dangerous in a way that felt colder. I folded the letter carefully and slipped it into my pocket, reminding myself that fear was exactly what these people had always counted on. In the weeks that followed, the legal process unfolded quickly. The prosecutor built an airtight case using my recordings, the sting footage, and the county's evidence from past incidents. In court, everything played out in a blur. Witnesses testifying, charges listed, objections raised, verdicts delivered. Janice and her crew were convicted on multiple counts. And when the civil suit followed, the judge ruled in my favor almost instantly. I won damages, more than I expected, enough to repair what the stress had broken, enough to reinforce my home security, enough to help me sleep again at night. But money wasn't the victory. The real win was seeing the community breathe again. Neighbors who once hid behind their curtains now walked outside freely. People waved at each other again. They thanked me, some quietly on their porches, others openly in the street, for standing up when they were too scared to. I didn't feel like a hero. I felt like a guy who did what any decent person would have done when pushed too far. Still, I knew fear lingers deeper in some people than in others. So when a local safety group invited me to speak about HOA scams and homeowner rights, I agreed. I told my story, every detail, the fake badges, the midnight trespassing, the forged documents. I explained what I learned from lawyers. Real HOAs must be recorded at the county office. No HOA can enforce rules without proper documentation. Any officer refusing to show identification is a red flag. Impersonation of law enforcement is a felony. Always call the sheriff. People listened. They asked questions. Some shared their own experiences, little hints of intimidation they'd shrugged off before, things they now realized weren't normal. And as I stood there, retelling the nightmare that had taken over my life, something inside me settled. Not peace, not closure, but strength. A kind of courage born from surviving something you never saw coming. Before leaving, I looked straight into the camera recording the event and said, "If you've ever dealt with a corrupt HOA, a fake inspector, or someone abusing authority, share your story. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and help protect others. No one should face this alone." For the first time, I felt like the story might help someone else avoid the trap I fell into. But that sense of calm didn't last. Later that night, I sat at my kitchen table sorting through the day's mail when I remembered the anonymous letter I'd found earlier. I pulled it out, laying it flat under the lamp, studying the handwriting again, the slanted letters, the uneven pressure, the looping style. Then my eyes caught the signature at the bottom, faint, curved, almost hidden in the crease of the paper. A last name I recognized instantly, and my blood ran cold. It wasn't Crowley. It was someone worse.